Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming. I want to thank Senator McCaskill for joining me today and for her leadership and the great work she's done on this issue. It was almost exactly 1 year ago that she and I joined forces. We wrote an op-ed in the USA Today urging the adoption of a moratorium on earmarks by both of our respective parties. Fortunately, we had a number of colleagues that joined in this effort, and both parties did, in fact, adopt such a moratorium, much to their credit. Our purpose today is to announce that we're going to introduce a bill together, and the bill would make a ban on earmarks permanent, and it would do so in a fashion that closes the loophole that allows the ban to be circumvented today. I think this is very, very important for a number of reasons. One is there is an effort underway to go back to earmarking as usual, as it used to be. And I think that would be a disaster for our country and for our Congress, and we intend to do our very best to prevent that. And it's important we do it for a number of reasons, the most obvious of which is we can't afford to waste money this way. We have staggering deficits. We have a completely unsustainable debt. We're on a fiscal trajectory that can only lead to disaster if we don't change this path. Well, by 2010, over the course of the previous 15 years, earmarking had tripled and had gotten up to $33 billion. Now, I'll acknowledge that $33 billion itself doesn't put us on a sustainable fiscal path, but we've got to start somewhere. And this is a good place to start. It's a really important place to start. In fact, I would argue there's no better place to start because, among other things, this is a badly flawed process, earmarking that is. It's a process that is designed and exists for the purpose of circumventing the kind of scrutiny and attention and competitive bidding that spending of taxpayer dollars should always be subject to. And worst of all, in my view, earmarks became a currency that was used to buy votes. There's an unwritten rule, but it was pretty well enforced that if somebody asked for an earmark in a bill and they got their earmark, they were obligated to vote for that bill regardless of how bloated it was, regardless of how wasteful it was. This should be completely unacceptable in an era where we're running trillion-dollar deficits, my goodness. So I think maybe the most important thing about this effort to have a permanent ban on earmarks is an effort to change the culture of Congress. I think we've got to change the culture from a Congress that historically has been all about seeing how much money can I spend to one that's focused on how much money can we save so that we can restore fiscal discipline, put ourselves on a sustainable fiscal path, and ensure the promising future that we can have if we get our fiscal house in order. So that is our mission today, and Senator McCaskill, again, thank you very much for your leadership in this effort and for joining me.
Thank you very much. It is great to be here with Senator Toomey today, working on a permanent ban on earmarks. I did not campaign against earmarks in 2005 and 2006. Frankly, I didn't really understand how the process worked until I got here. And when I got here and it was people were beginning to explain it to me, I said, well, this isn't right. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to participate in this process. No one could tell me who was making the decisions as to who got how much. No one could tell me how that process occurred. I know there were slips of papers being passed around. I know that there was some kind of effort to make people think at home that someone else was picking the winners and losers so the individual member wouldn't have to be the one responsible for picking winners and losers from all the people who are flooding their offices wanting these handouts. I know that certain members got a lot more than other members, and there was no explanation for that. The whole process, is coming from as a government auditor to this job, made me realize that something was amiss in the way this place spent money, and I said, I'm not doing it. And at the time, there were only 2 Democrats in the United States Senate that didn't participate in earmarking, and there were only a handful of Republicans. And frankly, most people looked at us like we were tilting at windmills. Literally, it almost felt like some of the senior appropriators were patting me on the head. Oh, sure, Claire. Yeah, you don't like earmarks. You're making a big mistake. They're never going anywhere. Well, fast forward, and thanks to Senator Toomey and others who have arrived here and the American people getting more educated about this, we now have made an effort to stop earmarking, which is a good thing. But frankly, I watch every day as people try to get around it. I was shocked when I saw the House Armed Services Committee put in the defense authorization bill hundreds of earmarks. Now, they claimed they weren't earmarks, but if it, walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And these were earmarks, no question about it. And we will have more information on our effort to look at that problem in the coming weeks. But it's clear to me that there are many people around here that want to get back to business as usual in terms of the earmarking process. That's why this legislation is necessary, to put into the Budget Act that earmarks are prohibited and to allow an enforcement mechanism on the floor of the Senate if anyone tries. And I will close with this, and then we'll take questions. I have many memorable moments for my first years in the United States Senate, but one of the most memorable is when I filed an amendment on the floor of the Senate to pull Nancy Pelosi's earmark out of the Farm Bill that had been slipped into the Farm Bill in the dead of night in conference, called an airdropped earmark. And I put this amendment on the floor of the Senate, and it was very awkward because the leaders of my party were aghast that I would take on the Speaker's earmark in an open amendment process on the floor of the Senate. And they were even more upset when I almost passed the amendment. And one of my colleagues came to me red-faced on the floor and said ugly things at that moment. And it was shocking to me that it was so controversial that I had done that. But it told me a lot about how this place worked and why it is important to be independent and strong and stand up for a process that is fair, based on merit, and has the taxpayers' interests at the top of the list. So I think this legislation will go a long way towards changing that culture, changing the quid pro quo of the earmark world, and get us back to a merit-based process where every dime we spend of taxpayer money is spent competitively and based on merit, not on how powerful you are, who you know, or how long you've been here. And we'll be happy to take questions.